Hi, this is Randy Pennington.
I'm Joe Calloway. Randy and I talk about leadership. You want to talk about something that everybody's been talking about for a very, very long time?
30, 40 years now.
Exactly, which is change.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, change since the 1990s has been just about the most requested topic or theme in every business meeting out there.
Yeah, and it will never stop. I mean, there will always be change. One of my favorite takes on change was a one-panel cartoon I saw years ago, and it's coworkers, man and a woman talk to each other, and the man says to the woman, "Change is good. You go first." And don't you think that's the way most people feel about it?
That is.
Because everybody gives lip service to, oh, we've got to be a change-driving organization. We've got to be aware of change. We've got to embrace change. But most people just flat don't like it.
Billy Crystal had a great quote. Change is so hard. That's it.
It is.
Change is hard. One of my very favorite ones is Don Draper.
Mad Men.
From Mad Men. Change is neither good or bad. It just is.
Yeah, it just is.
It just is. And so part of the reason why I think we want people to go first is it is hard. It doesn't always work. It's uncomfortable. We, especially as adults, we have so much other stuff going on in our lives that we want to maintain that level of comfort.
Yeah.
And so it is hard, but even today, how organizations think about change has changed.
And it has changed, and I think when you boil it down to a fundamental view of how organizations look at change, also how individuals look at change, is there are two basic fundamental perspectives. One is, and this is a mindset, change is a threat, that we have to be aware and wary of the threat of change. We have to always be on the lookout for the threat of change. And the other, of course, perspective would be the opportunity of change. Where's the change that will create our next opportunity? And you and I have worked with organizations that come down in each of those
Sometimes
positions.
they come down in both places.
Yeah, they can.
Somebody will go, well, the crisis is just the opportunity that hasn't been realized yet.
Yeah.
Or with every opportunity, there's the threat of crisis.
I've heard you talk about 4 possible approaches to change. Run through those.
Yeah, the first one, the one that most of us go back to, Jack Welch said back in the 90s when he was CEO of GE, how people look at change, how our people look at change as it comes at them will determine their success in the future. That's kind of paraphrasing that. So sort of the idea of adapt, and I talk about that. I sort of say, when I got married, my wife said, "Randy, I'll never ask you to change, but I do expect you'll continually adapt." That's one of the ways we look at change, and we all kind of get that one. But I think there's some other opportunities too. One is, I think there can be times when it's okay to ignore change.
Mm-hmm.
And some of ignoring change is maybe not 100% ignoring it, just letting it play out first.
Yeah.
So but there are times when it's okay to say no. You've talked about in the past how Warren Buffett says saying no to almost everything. There's some changes that Warren Buffett probably has skipped because it's not important.
The internet boom of the 90s. When Buffett said, okay, I get having millions of eyeballs on a website, but they're not selling anything. So this change, I'm going to take a pass on it. Wisely so.
Right, and he ignored it. And so there are some changes that you can ignore. That is a viable response. Now, there's sometimes having, I think, that response gets you in trouble.
Sure it can.
Look at the Postal Service. They assumed that mail was the only way to do things. You ever wondered what would have happened if the Postal Service had invented email?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have changed things? You and I have talked before, Sears should have been Amazon.
Yep.
They ignored some changes that they forgot about. So ignoring is one. Adapting is one. Anticipating is an option. You can always just anticipate and wait. We're ready for it when it gets here.
Mm-hmm.
But see, I think where things are headed for organizations, and I think for individuals too, is we got to pursue change.
Yeah.
We have to look for things to change every single day. But when you realize that you're making one of 4 responses to change, to me that sort of changes your view of change.
Let me ask you this, and I ask you this from my perspective with my business. I'm an avid pursuer of change. I'm always looking for and anxious for and excited about and wanting to get into the next change. Well, can that get in the way? How can that get in the way? Is that a legitimate threat to companies in terms of it'll get them off track? What do you think?
I think it can, and I'll go back to what you and I do, because part of what allows us to stay in business, to get all this gray hair that we have. I mean, it's not painted in for us folks. We're really this old.
I know I do it for credibility, but keep going.
But if you change too often, you get ahead of the marketplace, and the marketplace doesn't know where you are or how to interact with you.
Yeah.
So there's a challenge for you and me, is we could be so far out ahead that by the time the marketplace catches us, we get bored and we're off to something else. And I've had that problem myself. I've done it numerous times in my career. So yeah, you can get ahead of the market.
What you're talking about is you're talking about potentially even a great idea whose time hasn't come.
It's not there yet.
It's like, I remember many years ago, a colleague of ours said to me, we were talking about online banking. And he said, well, Joe, everybody can do online banking. I said, yeah, but nobody is. Less than 0.5% of bank customers are doing online banking. So the technology exists to do it. But if you're betting your brand on it right now, you've moved too soon.
That's right. So in that case, you need to anticipate.
Fast forward 20 years, and of course.
You need to anticipate where it's going.
Exactly.
And be ready to jump at the right time.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't jump today.
Jump too soon. Yeah.
Right. There's, I love that they talk about leading edge and bleeding edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be on the leading edge.
Okay, don't ask me this question, because I want to ask you, because it's a tough one. All right, Mr. Smarty Pants, how do you know what's the right time?
Yeah, you don't.
You don't.
But here's, we've talked in the past in other episodes about failing fast.
Yeah.
You throw it out there, stick, see if it's time. Or I think the other way you do it is you talk to your customers. And I've heard you say, and I've always loved this when you said it, is know more about your customers
than anybody else knows.
Than anyone else knows.
Yeah.
I think your customers, if you know them well, will tell you when it's time to start making that move.
Yeah. And there is a case to be made for, in some scenarios, you don't wait for your customers to lead you. You take a hand in leading them. It's like Steve Jobs said, I don't believe in focus groups, because they have no idea where we can go or what we can do. It's like the old story about asking people, well, what changes would you like to see in a car? Maybe windshield wipers in colors, different colors. They didn't know what the potential was. Change, again, it's so much of what we talk about is about balance and knowing when to move forward, when to wait. Is that a judgment that you develop by constantly paying attention to the market, by constantly communicating with customers?
Part of it, I believe it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's you constantly are communicating. I think you're throwing out ideas and seeing if they respond to it. Would you like to be able to do this?
Here's a question I love to ask my clients. I'll ask you, Randy, have you ever tried things and had ideas and rolled it out on the marketplace and they didn't work?
What's today? We're shooting this on a Monday, so not this week.
Yeah. So yes, you have.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. Are you going to have more ideas that you're going to roll out and they won't work?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. Anybody who says, no, we've learned our lesson, we're only going to do stuff that we know is going to work,
you're in trouble.
You're in big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't have to be first,
No,
but
you don't.
can't be last.
Right.
You can't be last in getting there. So, I mean, I think it's sort of pursuing things that are going to help make you better in the eyes of your customer. By the way, I think, and I'll go back to something that you've said a lot. You wrote a book about it. One of my very favorite books of yours is Be the Best at What Matters Most. That's where you got to focus on the change, is being the best and continually changing at those things that matter most to your customers.
A couple of things come to mind. One is about Zappos, and my observation about Zappos is that they're so good at the basics that they're cutting edge, which I love the idea that, and that I got that idea from lots of input from lots of places. But I think that's a pretty good rule to follow, not the only rule, but a great rule to follow. Be so good at the basics that you're cutting edge. Another, and this was from a tech company that said, I love this. Oh, Basecamp is the name of the company.
Great
and
company.
They said, buzzers and bells wear off, value never does. So how can I change, not in the interest of doing something new, but in the interest of creating value?
You create
Because
value.
that's the only point to innovation. Ultimately, it has to be to create value for the customer.
You know, I just read something that really struck me, is that when you think of the year 2050, if it doesn't sound like science fiction,
Yeah.
you're not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
And see, I think that's part of that job of the leader, is to be out there pushing to provide value.
I was working with a group one time, and the CEO of the company said, okay, we're going to go into breakout sessions now, and these breakout sessions are about good ideas and new ideas. He said, and here's the kind of ideas I want. He said, of course, we want incremental change. We work on that all the time. But for this session, I want you to come up with ideas that make the other people in the room roll their eyes and go, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. There's no way that can happen. That's what I want you to come up with. Stuff that shakes people up and goes, we can't. And then you say, yeah, but what if we could? What would that look like?
And how, and not just what if we could, but how could we?
Exactly. Meaning, well, what if we could was to get them to, all right, if we were to pursue that, and of course it's impossible, we can't do it, but I guess we would start with this. Okay, now you're getting somewhere. And the thing is, you can come up with an idea, and it may be goofy and ridiculous and impossible, but it may also make somebody at the table say, okay, maybe we can't do that, but you know what we could do?
We could do, and that's how ideas form.
Exactly, that's how ideas form. Instead of just stopping with, oh, that's a dumb idea, somebody else. No, let's pursue it for a while and see where it takes us.
And it's kind of understanding kind of what's out there. We historically don't do well at anticipating what's possible.
Yeah.
I go back to headline in the London Times, 1894, said, in 50 years, the city of London will be buried by 9 feet of horse manure.
I remember that.
And that's even though the automobile had been invented for 10 years already.
Yeah.
But nobody ever thought, well, how about if these cars took over?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody ever considered
No, that's not going to happen.
what's possible. Now, automobiles created other problems, but it solved the horse manure problem. And that's the most important thing. So part of ways of pursuing change is by thinking about always, what if we could?
Here's my parting thought for everybody. Then I'd love to hear yours. Mine would be this, to think in terms of, one way to think about change, and I think a good one is to think, all right, what could be? What could be? And if not us, who? And if not us, why not us? So think about what could be. What's your parting shot on change?
You know what? I have nothing that's going to beat that. So with that, I'm going to say,
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner.
We have a winner. The episode is closed. Here's the deal. You need to be thinking about change in your business. How you think about change determines what your future is going to be. We'll see you next time.
See you soon.